One of the things that Provost Madigan said earlier today was we're at a crossroads, right? That we've got a pivotal moment. And so some of us that have been in technology forever have seen sort of some of these pivotal moments through things like the internet. But generative AI really is moving us in a direction that we're not sure where it's going to go. And so one of the things that Beth has talked about quite a bit is around sort of the leadership of our students and accessible and actionable sort of education. And so as we look to the 40th as this pivotal moment for the future, we're looking at how do we train up leaders that are in that space, and leaders to the actionable part to make sure that we can actually do good in the world, but accessible to make sure that we're actually making sure it actually is an impact for everyone and what that looks like. So for this panel, we're going to sort of break it into a couple pieces around sort of the importance of diversity and how diversity is important for us to be able to sort of make leaders in the world in the right way. And then also around ethics. And of course, we're sticking James right in the middle as our student, as he can respond to some of these things as well. So with that, I'm going to have Angela introduce herself. Tell us a little bit about your work, the work that you've been doing inside of sort of diversity, sort of the work that you've done with some of the things within Khoury and Northeastern, and broadly around this sort of idea of, you know, diversity, experiential education, sort of how partners in industry, like education, can work together.
Thank you for having me today. I'm so honored. It's been such a great joy to listen to all the stories. And I'm Angela Harper. I work at UKG. I think the slide might be a little bit wrong, but it's UKG, which is two companies that joined back in 2020 of Ultimate Software and Kronos Group. So many of you here in Boston have heard of Kronos. We build human capital management software and workforce management software. That's a fancy way of saying HR software. I actually have been there for about a year. I joined from Dell Technologies previous to that, and I started working with a line program whenever I was at Dell. It's been a really great partnership because I believe, you know, my one of the challenges that I have is hiring great rock stars in computer science, and I know that finding those great rock stars are places, all different kinds of places, so not the usual places. So whenever I first met Ethan Sellinger here at Align and started getting to know the students, they just brought such a wealth of diversity and just different ways of thinking. I've got to meet some really great students during my time that I was working with them, and now I know we're actually making considerable more offers at UKG. So like one of the students I met was actually a military vet and a paralegal after she served her time in the military. And then, but as a paralegal, she was always being asked to install the software. And so she decided to go back. She was like, well, why don't I'm not the technologist, right? Why am I not getting my CS degree? So she went back to get her computer science degree. Very, I would say, you know, she was older than a lot of the other students. So I was like, hey, do you want to come be an intern with like, you know, younger students? And she was all game for it. And that really, I love that growth mindset. And I think that's one of the great things about having, you know, students from different places is they're a little bit used to having some adversity in their lives, and they have that growth mindset, and they can overcome a lot of the challenges that we have. So, so I actually started a class at another college, and been able to teach in the Align program as well. But the class that I taught was at Morehouse, Spelman, Clark. And in Clark, Atlanta, and Morehouse and Spelman. So, and it was I was actually teaching sales engineers, which is not quite computer science, but it was people that align with sales and technology. So marrying those two things together. And it was a really great program because I realized as I was in the classroom with the students and even with the professors, I could tell the professors were a little bit like, who's coming into my classroom? Why are they teaching this class? But the professors started to learn things, right? Because every company has a little bit different way of what they're looking for. And there are lots of different roles in those companies that a lot of the computer science faculty weren't even aware of. So it was really great to be able to tell students about other opportunities that they could go and pursue, students that may not have those connections and networks, but also to be able to have students help us to learn like what they're learning and be able to kind of have that partnership together. So it was a really great opportunity for me, and I look forward to doing more of that with the program here.
May, will you introduce yourself? And will you also tell us a little bit about your role in diversity, and then building off of what Angela was saying around really sort of building out a leader and why diversity is part of that.
Sure. My name is May Olatoye. I'm a senior product manager at AWS. I work within the hybrid space, so everything you think of that's in the cloud, just think of the opposite of that. We're basically trying to bridge the gap for people that are working in that space. So I actually grew up in England. I went to the University of Manchester. I got into computer science because fortunately for me, I was surrounded by a lot of people within my family, within our networks, that were into computer science, and I saw people that represented what I looked like. And so from that perspective, representation did matter, and well, it does matter, but that helped sort of fuel my curiosity and interest, and I completed my degree in Manchester. So fast forward, I've worked across different industries, and I think what I've seen that's been a constant is the fact that when you're able to bring diversity of thought, which can be represented in different ways, so even having a mix of international students, different genders, etc., that's allowed you to be able to really foster innovation, because you're put under pressure to consider varying perspectives to get to a better outcome. So at AWS, we really are very aligned to the Align program, because it allows us to actually take action on those fundamentals that we believe in and bring parity within the workforce. So we've been working with you for the past, since 2020, and the program has grown in terms of the number of applications. I believe we're at our highest level of internships this year, just over 40 people. And what we're able to do from that is, if it's completed successfully and we extend a full-time offer, we also think about the fact that there are barriers to people from underrepresented groups getting into STEM and technology degrees, etc. So we're able to think about, okay, what are these barriers? Is it a cost barrier? And then we alleviate some of that by actually funding the final semester of the applicant should they accept the full-time offer to join AWS after. So that's the Align program. I think talking about the broader question about leadership in technology, I would say being able to harness perspective and being able to start from the problem, but being able to harness the perspective of varying individuals and together collaboratively move that forward is an essential skill. It's almost more of a soft skill, right? So you're trying to take the best of everything you know technically, but also trying to merge that with the fact that you have people from varying backgrounds, varying perspectives. How do we evolve the idea and come up with a better solution? And I think you saw our VP Wayne there earlier talk about it's just better to have diverse thinking, and that can be represented in varying ways, as I said earlier. So I think it's really being able to develop that skill of bridging the gap, of being able to work with different kinds of people at an international scale level, different types of backgrounds, and harness the best of the ideas and bring them collectively together to move it forward.
Thank you. James, will you introduce yourself? You're a bit of a leader. I'm expecting you to take over my job sometime very soon. So will you tell us a little bit about some of the leadership things that you've done and a little bit of a student perspective on some of the things that we've been discussing this morning?
Sure, yeah. So my name is James Chang-Davidson. I'm a 4th out of 5 years computer science major here at Khoury. To be completely honest, I came to Northeastern as a film studies major, and very intentionally had a bit of an epiphany and switched to Khoury, computer science. Much happier, would never go back. But I actually also decided in my extracurricular activities that I would intentionally not pursue Khoury clubs. And I spent the bulk of my time here at Northeastern in a club called Northeastern Electric Racing, which hopefully you'll be able to get to see during the lunch and see the electric car as well. But I intentionally wanted to get a more interdisciplinary educational experience by immersing myself in students that were not like me and not having the same studies and the same classes and things like that. thankfully, most recently, I've actually been able to come back and work really closely with Dean Fontenot, who's started an initiative to really revamp the supports that Khoury provides to our student organizations. And that's where I sort of come in to help with a student perspective there and putting together a student team so that we can really have it be a collaboration between students and the college to support the pursuits and endeavors that the students are engaging in. But yeah, that's a little snippet.
Thank you. Vance, will you introduce yourself? So you teach, you have a joint appointment with Khoury. I'd love you to touch on what that is from the perspective, and also talk a little bit about the work that you've done on some of our ethics modules, some of the ethics training, some of the student work that you've done, but also sort of teaching our students from a perspective as somebody that's in another college.
Sure. So I have a joint appointment in philosophy and Khoury. A long time ago, I was a programmer and technical writer at IBM before I went back and got my advanced degree in philosophy. So I'm thrilled to be in a position where I have a foot in both of those worlds, both of those cultures, and I'm getting the opportunity every day to talk with really thoughtful and smart people about some, the word existential gets used a lot, but some of these are existential questions and problems. So I'm going to talk about 4 different things that I do. I'll try to race through this because I know everyone's hungry. The main thing that I do here is I teach a course this is a philosophy course called Technology and Human Values. This is a course that meets a Khoury requirement. So in fact, 90% of the students in the course, even though it's a philosophy course, are actually from Khoury. So the course focuses on ethical questions that arise both in the design and uses of different kinds of technologies, mostly digital technologies, since the students are mostly Khoury students. In fact, today is a class day. I told my students they could take today off, but they were welcome to come here if they wanted to, or watch online. Okay, that's thing number 1. Thing number 2, actually thanks in part to Christo, who was part of a group that won a Mozilla Foundation grant in 2018 and 2019. I'm one of a couple of faculty who design what are called ethics modules, and these are particular topic-based ethical modules for specific Khoury courses. No one claims that in 1 or 2 class visits that you can transform someone, but what we do and seek to do in the modules is to introduce students, say in a cybersecurity course, to a way of thinking about privacy or a way of thinking about responsible disclosure of vulnerabilities, or in a robotic systems course, thinking about, well, what is the value of care? So if we're moving into a world where more people may receive some sort of care from automated agents, what are the components of care that we don't think can be replaced by humans? And what are the ones that we do? And how does that affect the way that we think about systems of design? The third thing is a CS Ethics and Research Award. There were 4 students who won that award this past year. They spent the year meeting with me, Lainey Strange, and Mika Magnani, just to train up in learning about different ways of analyzing some of the ethics of technology questions. They then went to the Grace Hopper Conference last September, where they got to meet a lot of great people and network, and formulate a research project that each of them wanted to do independently to address some particular ethical question that they had related to a digital technology. And then the 4th thing is on the horizon. So we've been in conversations with you, as you know, and with Dean Beth about ways of embedding the teaching of ethical concepts more fundamentally, even at the beginning programming levels. So not just at the intermediate and upper level courses as a sort of one-off module, but really threading those concepts and those skills throughout the lower, so-called lower levels of the curriculum.
Thank you. Christo, you're last, but will you tell us a little bit about your background, both as the leader of the cybersecurity undergraduate, sort of looking at, or future looking, your leadership over our undergraduate programs. And just tell us a little bit about some of that.
Yeah, so I'm Christo Wilson, single appointment in Khoury. I'm the director of our Bachelor's in Cybersecurity program. And as Vance mentioned, I helped kickstart this effort to integrate ethics modules throughout Khoury's undergraduate curriculum. So, I'm so grateful that Vance and Mika and other faculty who we've had been fortunately able to hire have continued this effort forward of integrating these modules. And I'm really looking forward to expanding that, as Vance said, more into our introductory classes, but just more broadly throughout the entire curriculum. when Ron Sandler and I applied for that grant from Mozilla, we had some concerns initially about that effort. One was, would faculty accept this? We were saying we would like to bring ethicists and philosophers into your classes and take time away from technical topics to talk about the values laden in these technologies. You could very easily imagine faculty saying, no, like that's not a great use of time. And I've been just so pleased by the response to this. By and large, our faculty are hungry for this content. Our faculty recognize that we're teaching people to go out in the world and build these systems that have these impacts, and they want the students to understand the issues at play and be forearmed with methods to try and navigate those responsibilities. But as computer scientists, we're not really always equipped to give students that knowledge. So the faculty have really embraced this. They want people like Vance and Mika to come in and help the students to learn these issues and gain these skills. So then the other part of that was, would students accept this new curriculum? Again, you could very easily imagine engineering students saying, this is not my problem, right? I'm here to write code. This is someone else's responsibility. And again, we've been really pleasantly surprised. The students are wise to the world. They read the news, they go out on co-ops and have experiences with real systems and real customers and real challenges. And historically, they've come back, and we had one class that sort of engaged with these topics, but they had concerns. They didn't feel like they were being fully equipped to try and navigate this world where computing is so central and implicated in so many issues. So the students, I think, are really engaged with this content as well, and they want more of it. They want to do good. That's why they're here. And doing good means not just building good technology technically, but also thinking about the values at play. So the last thing I'll say is a little bit about cybersecurity. This is another area where we really conceptualize the space very broadly. Cybersecurity is a huge field, and it's not just math or applied math and cryptography. It's not just hacker types who want to tinker with systems. It also extends to things like usable security and privacy and meeting people where they are and their needs and how they interact with systems that have these kind of security requirements. So again, this is a growth area for the college and the institute, of bringing in more faculty with these kinds of perspectives, and going forward, integrating this again more into the undergraduate curriculum and giving people the opportunity not just to get these hard skills, the programming, the reverse engineering, but also these more human-centric skills. What does it mean to build something that is secure for your grandma? That is a whole different set of challenges that are equally important.
James, I'm going to jump to you just to sort of give your perspective from the student. Christo was talking a little bit about the curriculum, and May mentioned a little bit on the Align program, and Angela did too, around sort of these multiple backgrounds, right? So as an undergraduate that's in Khoury, I don't know if you've taken the class yet from... Yes. Can you talk a little bit about why it's so important to have a curriculum that looks like that? You talked about it with student groups, but how is it that the curriculum and the student groups, and you're also on co-op, how do all of those experiences blend together to sort of make a bigger whole?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I took the course back in fall of 2021, I believe, when we were all virtual. In my experience, and as someone that's really immersed themselves with students from all kinds of different backgrounds, I've found that there doesn't appear to be anybody else doing just what Khoury is doing, and sort of having all of our students be philosophically literate in computing social issues. And I think it really made a positive impact on my educational experience, wherein there is no other experience which really gives you that chance to understand at a conceptual level what kind of challenges there are, and then also start to really have those discussions about how to apply them to real computing issues. The part that I'm really excited about is the opportunity to extend and expand that. To see it integrated in more of the curriculum, I think would be amazing, because we make plenty of little games in our classes and have no thought whatsoever to ethical implications, and then go on co-op and my first co-op was DNA gene sequencing, and that absolutely has ethical implications. So, we really do get dropped into the deep end. And I think student groups have a unique opportunity to supplement the curriculum that we have, wherein a lot of the student groups that we have in Khoury and the student groups we have sort of jointly with other colleges are giving students the opportunity to work hands-on on projects that also have deep ethical implications. And at least from my current experience, we haven't necessarily challenged our students to the level which I think we really should be to consider those ethical implications of the software that they're building today and for the last several years. And so that's one of the major efforts that I'm working on trying to see is how can we encourage these students to apply those concepts deeper into all facets of their education, both in their curriculum and in their clubs and student organization projects.
Thank you. Vance, building off of what James was just saying, what would it like if we're now going to pivot to the future and we could really do anything, right? So like this, you're looking at me, look at Beth, but you're looking at me, too much of me, look at Beth. If you could really have anything, and what would this look like, knowing that we've got this kind of almost crisis that a couple people have hinted at today, what should a curriculum look like? And in the future, like future scoping for like 10 years from now, we're looking back, where should Khoury, we're going to lead. So where should we go?
So thinking specifically about it from a Khoury context and not just a generic CS program context, I think building on the current strengths that we have is essential. And so to go back to what you were suggesting, James, feedback that I've gotten from some of my own students parallels what you've suggested, which is many of them feel eager, ready, refreshed by these kinds of ethical conversations, but then totally unprepared by us for the world in which, the world of work. And that's not to say that the academy is not the, quote, real world, but it is to say that the incentives are different. And so understanding and being ethically, having ethical discernment may not mean very much if you're the person at the bottom of the organizational chart. So learning more and us giving students more skills, I think, about where do you find allies in an organization? What are some of the ways in which you can convince people that you work for that, in fact, ethics is something that we all do already care about, and it's not just a matter of scolding people or wagging your finger in their face, but ethics really, at its best, is a way for us to live up to the aspirations that we have. And so framing it more in terms of opportunities to demonstrate your ingenuity, right, rather than constraints that are ruining everyone's fun, I think is really important. The other thing I would suggest as well is, and I made this point last week in class to a couple of students, so I apologize for those of you who are hearing this again, but really thinking about going into government, thinking about going into public policy, thinking about going into nonprofit organizations as places where, again, you can put your skills to service in places where they're really needed. The final thing I would say is, about curricular reform more generally. I think it's always great to hear from people who are already out in the working world or already out in the policy world and just making those sorts of visits and presentations a kind of regular aspect of a student's education. Especially, we have such a rich and deep pool of Northeastern alum. So even if we just drew from that pool, I think, again, that has a kind of credibility that even the most beloved faculty member isn't necessarily going to have.
And Christo, just to build off that, I want to ask it, as we train up students to get out into the world, what are the ways that we can be thinking about, again, thinking future around some of the things that Vance just said around building students to be sort of citizens, working in the community, sort of. Can you speak to that and what that looks like for us in the future?
Yeah, so in some respects, I think we are making progress. So we have this educational program. It's built around something called value-sensitive design. It's a set of tools for recognizing when values are at play, who are the stakeholders, and then how to try to navigate trade-offs and ultimately build better things, right? So that's good. Where I think we need more work and where the challenges lie is, helping people choose career paths, and when they're actually out in the world or like in a particular job, affecting change in the workplace. So as Vance mentioned, one thing we have to do better on is not necessarily steering everyone to industry, right? There are other opportunities for people who do tech. Tech is everywhere now, right? incredible opportunities to do things in government, whether that's a regulator like the FTC, or for cybersecurity people, right, in national defense, but even like nonprofits. There's whole ranges of the economy that we would not have thought of as tech 10 years ago. They're tech now. Those opportunities are there. So bringing those to the fore, highlighting those opportunities to people, showing them that there's different opportunities and ways to cause change in the world. I think that's really important. And then thinking about industry, I think that's the even bigger challenge. People want to go to the big companies. They want to go where they're going to have resources and opportunities to work with data and big compute. But those are also the institutions that are hardest to change. So what does it mean to live your values at a place like that and affect change? That's bigger than Khoury, but it also kind of starts here because we're supplying the engineers. So we have to be at the forefront of that.
I think that's like going to cue up Angela and May really well there. Maybe I'll pick on Angela first, and then I'm right back at you, May. But what Christo's right. There are so many companies. These big companies. Our students come in, they want to work at these big companies, but they do have core values, and they do want to make change. They are excited about that. But you're excited about that too, right? And that's some of the work that you do. Can you speak to sort of again future? What does the future look like when we're training up these diverse students when they're there? How does the company support them? We talk about curricular change. We can't do that without you either. So Can you speak to some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot. I completely agree with everything that you were saying, and we do want people. We kind of the way we look at our purpose as people actually at UKG, and we look at people as uniquely valued because it's what they bring to the company that helps us to be stronger and better. And even if especially if that's different than what we already had, right? We do want people to live out their values, and sometimes it is those differing values that makes us better. Because I was thinking about earlier. We want to do things that are good. David was talking about that. Who's good? Like making sure that we're all having, very different diversity of thought that's coming together for that. So we do highly value, and I do think that there's strong value in having the students be exposed to so many different things in the curriculum. Whenever we would go into there, it wasn't necessarily, we knew not every student in there was going to come work for our company, and also that they weren't all going to be interested in the career path that we were telling them about, but we were opening a door to say, hey, there's other things that you can kind of go and pursue. And I think that the companies, one of the research that came out, we actually also own Great Place to Work, which is the Forbes list, 100 Great Places to Work, and you can become certified as a company. But some research that just came out recently is that, people want to be valued, right? We all want to be at a place that values us, and companies want to be innovative and make money. But the 100 best places to work almost doubled their revenue per employee. So that's pretty amazing. That means that you don't have to choose between having those values, being a responsible company, and outperforming the market. You can have both because it's really that uniquely valuing people and fostering innovation, which is allowing them to come and be what they were supposed to be, that helps drive those company numbers. So it's really great.
Yeah, May. Also, I don't know that we explained the AWS program to everyone. So I don't think people understand sort of the wonderful relationship that we have with AWS. Again, a big company, really looking at diversity, but sort of working with Khoury to sort of students are out there working, they come back, you sponsor their semester, right? There's a wonderful relationship there. Even thinking about the future, what is AWS's role in that space? Like, what do you personally think with that? If we're, again, future scoping, like, what does it look like to have this relationship grow and strengthen? What could it look like, and how is it important with ethics and the kinds of conversation we're having?
Absolutely. I think, ethics starting at this level is incredibly important. If we look at computer science 20, 30 years ago, we weren't having this discourse. So I think we're laying the seeds that we will reap in the next 10, 20 years of leaders that are thinking about their products from the onset and thinking about the consumers and how it affects various aspects from an ethical perspective. So I think we're doing the groundwork, and that's fantastic. With regards to the Align program, it's an amazing program, as I mentioned, that we've been able to foster with you. We've been able to, as part of the program, we assign students a mentor through the course of the program itself. And we work with you because we are really mindful of the concept of building leadership for the future requires investment in the youth today. And so doing that now with the Align program really allows us to have a mechanism that's working actively and growing and scaling. As I mentioned, we're at the highest sort of internship level that we've had since the onset. It gives us that mechanism to get there for the future. I think one thing I would say about trying to infuse some of these ideas and concepts that you're learning in a corporate structure is to think about it from two perspectives. One, making incentives align, and two, influence. So I'll talk about incentives align, and I think when you're trying to get a body of people to move forward and do something, you want to design it so that the incentives align to motivate people to want to follow that course of action. And so it's really sort of thinking about more practically, when you do come on your internship and you have discussions with people and it opens up your network, what can you see across different organizations? What are the synergies that exist? What are the goals that they both share that they could come together on and maybe reduce the cost of this, and then it gives you a different outcome here. And the things that tend to be of that sort of synergistic nature tend to also fall into the scope and bucket of diversity. We all want similar goals. We all want a diverse workforce. We want that because it leads to more innovation. And we've seen the data shows us that companies have a higher revenue derived from innovation that are more diverse. So it all sort of comes back together. And then just to touch on influence really quickly, again, it is a soft skill and it's going to take time to develop that. But you want to position yourself to be mindful of where you are first and understand the environment, understand your network, build your network, and then use that as a mechanism to facilitate your growth and your sphere of influence. So you might not be able to affect that space, but perhaps the network that you build with someone there that has the influence can, and they can give a voice to your goals, outcomes, etc. So yeah, those are probably the things I would add to everything you've all said. That was very, very much on point.
Thank you. So there were two things I wanted to sort of talk about a little bit, and we've been talking about ethics and diversity and this kind of responsibility, but it's been mentioned a couple of times around the soft skills. One of my friends, she's not in the audience, but Barbara Larson in the School of Business says very clearly, this soft skills are really, really hard. We should stop using the word soft. And so one of the things that I think is true is that it is actually difficult, and it's critical that we do some of those things. And we've talked about it in a kind of different ways. We put ourselves in a space of we're working with different audiences and different groups and different thoughts, and that sort of helps us personally grow. When we think about ethics and grounding it in our personal values, it helps us grow. James, we future scoping again and thinking about this. What are some, looking back first, what are some of the sort of areas that, and I know that you've done this through some of your student groups, and I think we could speak to that, of course, what are the soft skills that you've learned, and where are the places you've learned them? And then how can we be better at that? How can we help our students in the future get more exposure to that?
Gosh, there's too many to count, honestly. I think this might be a little bit of a strange answer, but I think that the places where I learned the most, looking back on my experiences and developing my soft skills, were times when I was the most uncomfortable, the challenged the most. And sometimes you can't create those scenarios because it's not right to always manufacture or encourage bad situations. But I think that we can look at those and say, to some degree, in human interactions, they're always inevitable. That there are going to be challenging scenarios in working with others, and that's a fact of life. And I think what we need to do as a college is to prepare our students with the right resources to handle and figure out how to deal with those situations. And from a soft skills perspective, I think a lot of that can be derived from encouraging collaborations, wherein students, I haven't exactly properly filled you in about it, but over the last semester, working with Dr. Fontenot, we've been able to fund through Khoury several different collaborative organization events that have spurred a slow but gaining momentum movement where we can encourage our student organizations to work and collaborate with other student organizations, where we can build a lot more of these mixing sort of pots where students are able to interact with students of completely different backgrounds and completely different experiences here at Northeastern. And I really want to be able to extend that further and go beyond just those sorts of events to say, how can we encourage collaborations? How can we get people to be taking on challenges in an interdisciplinary manner to practice those soft skills and get better through experiential learning?
Thank you. Christo, one of the things that we sometimes try to do as professors is sort of let students fail in a safe way. I mean, so James was kind of hinting at sort of like, we actually do kind of experiment with them a little bit, and we put them in situations where that, and I try to explain this to parents all the time, right? Your student is going to your student is going to fall down. So how do we build these in a supportive way? But how do we do it in a way that, like, this kind of growth and this, we say experiential learning, but I always say that some of the experiential learning that we all did first was to ride a bike, and we fell down. And so some of the things that we do in computer science is around that. So how do we help them fall down safely? How do we help them fail the right way?
Yeah, I mean, nobody ever rises to meet a challenge if they're not presented with a challenge in the first place, right? And you're not going to succeed every time, right? That's just the nature of the beast. But that said, right, that's where growth comes from. So, I mean, like in my own classes, I try to design educational experiences that are intentionally challenging, but also fair and clear, and that provide lots of opportunities for feedback. So these are things that are very hands-on, very experiential, project-based. They often come with very extensive like test cases or challenge sets or discrete benchmarks, so you sort of know how you're doing. And yeah, it's going to be hard to get them all, but you always know where you stand, and there is a path forward. You're not just sort of twisting in the wind with no guidance. I think that's how students end up having really educational and rewarding experiences. It really tickles me when students apply for co-ops and they list like their favorite projects and these formative experiences, and it's things from my classes. But designing these things is hard. It takes a lot of time and thought, and it doesn't always succeed the first time, so it's iterative, and there's this experimental give and take of what worked and what didn't work and what can I do better next time. But ultimately, again, that's how you build things that are truly rewarding and translate kind of the things that we're spouting about in class into an actual hands-on skill that is really internalized and transferred.
And one of the things when we sort of fail, a lot of times we need someone to pick us up. And May, you mentioned this earlier around mentorship. Can you just add a little bit more around the importance of having a mentor, and what does that look like? And the importance of sort of scaling mentorship, which is, I think, one of the things that's challenging, but you guys have done a pretty good job in trying to figure that out. Or worked on it.
Yes, I mean, we're constantly iterating to evolve what we do. But I think for me personally, I've had, the opportunity to, and I would say mentorship can happen on a very formal level, and you can have really strong mechanisms to achieve it at scale that you put in place. Perhaps for software engineers, for example, we can assign you someone we have like a mentoring platform internally. So you can either be self-directed and actually find someone, or you can yourself volunteer to mentor someone, so it kind of goes both ways. But I also think it's important to step out yourself and actually find people from backgrounds that are not like yours, with experiences not like yours, but they're further ahead of you and they've gone through that process, and there's a lot you can learn from that process of working with them. And I would say also that generally speaking, it is important to also think about mentorship the other way, in terms of if you have basically gotten to where you are, send the elevator basically back down and have a mindset to reach out back to people, across communities, across your own communities that you've come to, and to make sure that you're making yourself available for the next wave of individuals coming through as well.
Vance, you've done some work in the space around working with students and building off of the mentorship a little bit, but that individual work of sending students to different conferences, different areas, having them come back and share their experiences, and being able to sort of, in some sense, try to scale some of that work, but doing it in a very intentional way, but also doing it in a targeted way that they would go to a particular conference. Can you say more about the kinds of students that have done that when they've come back and how that kind of fits into some of the things that we've been talking about?
Sure. So right now it's a pilot program, as you know. So hopefully the first of what will be a long series to come. But so the students in the pilot group, 2 of them were or are undergraduate students, and 2 are actually aligned students. And the 4 of them actually chose the same conference. We had a choice. They could attend either the Grace Hopper Conference or the Tapia Conference, both of which took place in September. And all 4 of them decided, you know what, we've gotten to know each other over the summer. We've bonded a little bit. We would prefer just to all go to the same conference and hang out and have more adventures. And so that's what they did. They had a great time. There's photo evidence to prove that as well. And each of them had come back with a specific kind of project that they wanted to connect it to mentoring a little bit. They had all had a great opportunity at the conference to meet people not at Northeastern, but also in the field, who they continued using as resources while they were developing those projects. Lainey, Mika, and I worked with them as their research advisors throughout the fall semester and then continuing into this just ended semester. Northeastern has an annual conference called RISE, as most of you know, I think, and we were really proud of all 4 students' poster presentations at the RISE conference. So as we're thinking about what it might look like to scale that program up or to increase the program, again, thinking about it in a very intentional way, because we did want a program where the ratio of faculty to students was manageable, and in this case there were 3 faculty members and 4 students, and so fairly labor intensive if you're thinking about doing it on a larger scale. But I think those 4 students would also say that they really benefited from that small size. So again, the challenge is just, okay, how are there ways we can replicate the best aspects of that without losing control of the best aspects?
And one of the things that we always look at is sort of how do we get near-peer mentors and using students to mentor students. James, can you speak to some of the kinds of things that you've experienced or mentored other students in yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I want to harp back on what May said about mentorship really as a mindset. And I think that's something that's really big, actually, without even having to do really anything among our students and student groups. It takes a lot of effort to grow a student organization that can sustainably build software projects or execute various programs with the sort of existential crisis of you're going to graduate. So you have to do something to transfer your knowledge to other students. And that really comes into mentorship of how do students effectively foster a culture in which they can effectively teach each other. And we've seen them time and time again putting on various workshops and basically bending over backwards to make sure that other students who are coming in, the freshman classes and even the NUN students coming in second semester, have all of the same opportunities to learn just as much as any other student, and be able to learn more than is available in the curriculum, in the classes, and be able to go above and beyond to succeed through students teaching students. I've seen that time and time again, and I'm really excited to start to really see how we can encourage that even more and support the students in doing that, since it can be very challenging to dedicate a significant portion of your time not just to building the software that you want to, but also teaching others. You almost become a little bit of a professor, designing my own curriculum and having a whole classroom of students. I do not envy the professors here and what they do. I spent plenty of time trying to do that, and honestly, my approach was always to say, I'm not going to do any preparation, just quiz me on my knowledge, because honestly, it's also a learning experience for myself. They say that best form of mastery is being able to teach it. And I always challenge myself to teach it without a whole lot of preparation, because that really means that I understand it and can effectively try and teach. Can't necessarily say how effective my teaching was, but it's what we do to try our best to continue and pass that knowledge off.
Nate hates it when I don't prepare. It's going to be an interesting semester next semester, Nate. So, Angela, can you talk a little? So they're talking about teaching and teaching each other. How does that play out in industry?
Yeah, I mean, we have, just like May has formal mentor programs, and we have, boot camp programs to help with training people from non-computer science backgrounds to be more technologists. But we also have informal programs. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is our employee resource groups. We do a lot with our employee resource groups. We actually encourage a lot of allies to be a part of those employee resource groups, because I think Beth said it was hubris to think we can do this all by ourselves, right? And to always constantly be learning. So there's a lot of learning and development that happens within those groups. There's a lot of learning and development that happens formally in our talent development department, but there's a lot of informal learning that happens as well. And we have actually mentor circles, because it is you do something well, you want to train somebody else, you want to send that elevator back down, right? You want to, I'm always encouraging, especially students, whenever I was, setting them up with mentors, but say, keep those connections, right? Keep those connections, because a lot of times it's your network that really helps you to grow and also helps you to get connected to other roles and things. And one of the things that I found that's kind of magic is a lot of executives do want to mentor younger people, because I think it helps them to feel young. And a lot of younger people do want to, so don't be afraid, right, to reach out to somebody if you want to learn something, and just approach it with a sense of wanting to learn and to be knowledgeable. But I know you were saying about soft skills are hard. I think it's more of relational skills, right? So it's more about relating to other people, seeing people as what they can help you to learn about differences in the world and helping you to grow.
I was just going to say, there's a term for it. I think it's called reverse mentoring, and it's highly effective. So you can learn a lot and get a completely different perspective and stay young, of course.
That's right, absolutely.
So we've talked about mentorship, we've talked about diversity, we've talked about sort of the ethics in this, and then so our final sort of round, and I'm going to start all the way at Christo and then sweep. It's Khoury, and it's another 40 years in the future. What do Khoury leaders look like 40 years from now? So very abstract question from the theoretician, because no one has ever put any of my assignments on their co-op resume. Oh. Just so I teach theory of computation. It's what computers can't do.
So I think future Khoury leaders are highly interdisciplinary, but also aware of their own limitations and really engaged with working with people from yet more disciplines to build great things.
Oh my gosh, that was such a great answer, Vance. It's like he just ended the whole thing right now. Exactly.
Well, yes, I don't know how to follow that, but I'll just throw some words and maybe some of them will be coherent. So one of the previous panelists alluded to Sisyphus kind of rolling the boulder up the hill. And I mean, what was part two of that story? Well, right, part two is the boulder is always rolling back down and Sisyphus is always pushing it back up for all eternity. So as we're thinking about what Khoury might look like in 40 years, to build on what Christo was saying about what Khoury graduates would look like, one of the things I talk about a lot in the Tech and Human Values course is that there are ways in which technological systems sort of overlay onto existing patterns of discrimination, existing patterns of disadvantage, rather than necessarily transforming them. So there will always, in other words, be a fight. There will always be some disadvantaged group. There will always be someone or some system that is hurting people. And so I think that 40 years from now, it may not be the same systems that we currently have, but I would want Khoury students, Khoury graduates to have the skills and the discernment to be in the forefront of those fights, in part with the technological skills and the ethical skills that they've acquired at Northeastern.
I'll sort of paint a picture by looking at a little example of my own experience in electric racing. I said I intentionally tried to engage with students who are not like me and had different studies, but sort of fortunately or unfortunately, I ended up gravitating back towards building software for electric racing, and that put me on a path to struggle through figuring out what exactly a web application is and how to build one, and translate a lot of that to my co-op. But now, 4 years later, I see freshman students coming into electric racing with worlds more knowledge than I had even now. And I'm constantly amazed by how much they're able to do, and quite frankly, somewhat envious of just how much more they've been able to progress with these new systems in place of teaching students, students teaching students, and all these opportunities available. So the way I look at it is that Khoury students 40 years in the future now are going to be so much more prepared, so much more globally aware, self-aware, philosophically and ethically aware than we can imagine now. We can look at just a few years in the past to see how much growth has accelerated, and if we can keep up this trend, we'll have we won't be able to predict what 40 years from now is going to look like. And my hope is that we're able to translate that into, our industry partners and also academia and government, all looking at the sort of new class of graduates that are coming out and saying, I want Khoury students. That's what I'm looking at.
May, you can add to that, but also feel free to sort of generalize around what does that leader look like in tech? And
I would say, we're at a point where there's a lot of innovation happening now with, you talked about generative AI and all of those things. And I think the future of work looks very different. And we don't fully understand, how, wide-reaching that will be. And I see technology leaders of the future understanding how to navigate that space, but also being able to go up a level and understand how to work in a highly collaborative way with a very diverse set of people. The concept of diversity and the disciplines and the groups that we represent through diversity will be able to work in this future that basically allows us to move innovation and thought forward in all that we do. So I think they'll be very prepared to handle the dynamism of how the future of work will change through all of this work and effort across the board.
Ditto.
I don't have to answer the question, so.
Did all of it. No, I mean, absolutely, right? There's a lot, but I guess whenever I was thinking about the 4 years from now, really what I see as the future leader is someone that has a strong desire and opportunity to solve some human challenges with technology, right? To make the world a better place and to strive every day to do that ethically and with, intentions of helping the human race to be better and themselves. So.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of the panelists. And I think we've clearly answered Provost Madigan's question of whether or not we're going towards good or bad. It's very clear that we're going very good and that the future looks very bright. So again, thank you very much, everyone.